Heart to Heart with Saima. We come live every Tuesday, 4 p.m. Central Time. The podcast show for people searching for that courageous person within us who wants to be inspired by listening to stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. I'm Saima Dillon, your host. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be here. Let's dive right in. My guest today is Soniah Kamal. She's an award-winning novelist, essayist, and public speaker. When she was introduced to me by a friend of a friend's, that friend said, Soniah has so many accomplishments to her name that it is difficult to just list them. Her most recent novel, Unmarriageable, Pride and Prejudice in Pakistan, is a Financial Times Reader's Best Book of 2019. Soniah's TEDx talk is about second chances. She has taught creative writing at Emory University, Oglethorpe University, and teaches at the MFA program at Reinhardt University. And without taking any more time, I'm going to bring Soniah on to the stream. Soniah, welcome to Heart with Saima. How are you doing?
Thank you, Saima, so much for having me on Heart to Heart. I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. It's my honor to have you on my show. Every week, I have some amazing individual here. And I just said on my show, when you were introduced to me on Facebook Messenger, I was told that she is extremely humble, and she just has so many credentials to her name that it was difficult actually for me to list everything. So I'm going to give the screen over to you and let you tell us a little bit about yourself.
This is always a very hard question to be asked. A little bit or a lot about oneself. I always feel one either reverts to geography and where one has lived. In my case, I was born in Pakistan, but I grew up partly in England and Saudi Arabia, returned to Pakistan, then came out to college in the US. And my senior year, met my partner and stayed on in the US. I frequently visit Pakistan also, though. And I unlike a lot of writers, I never really wanted to be, I never wanted to be a writer, which is what my TEDx talk is about, actually, which is why I call it Second Chances, because I didn't get to live the dream of what I really wanted to do. And writing almost gave me a second chance at life, but writing chose me, I would say. And it was, it took me a long time to come to terms with writing having chosen me, or me becoming a writer. And so slowly, as I've seen my bio expand over the years, it's been very interesting to myself also to see how one's bio does expand and how you turn into a published writer who can add the so-called accomplishments that you're referring to the list. So
writing was not something that you really wanted to do. So what was it that you really
I wanted to be an actress, actually, when I was around 12, 13, something around that time. I forget the exact age, but I happened to watch, and this will tell my age, on VCR, a movie on VCR, Umrao Jaan. The Indian Umrao Jaan, the movie from India. There's a Pakistan Umrao Jaan also that came around the same time, and I watched that also at around the same time. But it was when I'd watched first the Indian Umrao Jaan. I remember watching a movie, and it's a traumatic movie, really. It's about two girls who are kidnapped when they're adolescents, and literally based on the complexion of their skin. One is married off into a Nawab family and becomes a respectable lady, as the subcontinent and that region calls them. when you're married. And the other one, who was played by Rekha, because she's of a darker complexion, she's actually sold into a brothel. And the story follows Rekha and what happens to her. And to give away all spoilers, at the end, she actually comes back to her hometown, and the climactic scene really is what happens when she sees the house that she was kidnapped from again. But I don't know what it was, honestly, about that particular movie. But the minute I finished it, I remember I just knew I wanted to be an actress. I wanted to act. And my mother came, she's a doctor, she came back from work that day, and I told her, oh, I want to be an actress. She gave me one swift smack. She was like, in Urdu, she said, oh, your father will kill himself. Because coming from a Muslim background, acting and stuff, at least in my father's family, was not, or to my father, was not considered very respectable. But, which was what I want. So I said, okay, but it was what I wanted to do. So I would literally, when my parents were out and stuff, I did very naughty things, like practicing dancing to Rekha steps and Hima Malini's and Jayashree T's and Aruna Irani's, whichever song, whichever dance, I would be there. So I learned, when people, it turned out I'm a decent dancer. So when people ask me, who taught you, where'd you learn? I'm like, I list, I'm like every actress that you can think of. And then when we returned to Pakistan around when I was in the 9th, 10th grade, as it so happened back in those days, and I'm sure these days, I was actually seen by some producers, directors happened to see me, and they offered me movies and TV roles and stuff, and big hangama, big commotion at home, and I wasn't allowed to do it. And really, I lived with that regret for a very, very, very long time. I mean, regrets are bad enough, but when you've been handed what I think of as something that should not have been a regret at all, but when they've been handed to you by your parents or the society or culture you come from, it's a very bitter pill to swallow, especially when times and eras change on you. And nowadays, even in Pakistan, acting, singing, etc., is not the huge taboo it once was. Then it does pinch a bit. I'm like, oh, if I'd been born 20 years later. So the trajectory of time, the time period we're born in, the era that we're born to, and within that, the choices that we're given has made me very cognizant of all the women and men who have come before us, who have in time periods where certain things were not necessarily de rigueur or allowed, the ones that raised their voices, stood up there, the ones on whose shoulders we also often stand in almost everything. I'm very what's the word? I'm very conscious of that. But with writing, writing for me, I've been writing since I was, very, very little, 8 years old, and more so storytelling. It was something I always did. It's like, for me, it was like singing in the shower. You sing in the shower, but how many people then think that they're going to go on to sing? It's just something you do, right? Like skateboarding and stuff, so that's what writing was to me. I was always telling stories. I was that annoying child in the neighborhood who would gather my cousins and friends and say, okay, we're going to do this play and you're going to be this and you're going to, and my, dancing in Pakistan, dancing at weddings is very big. So I was always the choreographer, the main dancer, the choreographer, giving orders to everyone. So, and I would write plays and stuff. So I was always writing, but it was nothing I meant to ever do professionally or seriously. But once I graduated from college and, like I said, met my partner, and we moved around a lot early in the US. Writing was something I could do at home, and slowly I started to send my writing out to get published. And before I knew it, I was published, and writing had chosen me. So
So it was meant to be.
I guess. I guess. I mean, I guess it was meant to be, but also, as I've grown older, I've realized even within that, I had a choice. I mean, a lot of professions or a lot of things might choose us, but we still have the choice to not do them, And writing is a very, very hard career. The rejection rate in writing. I mean, I've been writing since 1996, and my first novel, Unmarriageable, came out last year in the US. So, but I've written personal essays along the way, being published in anthologies, a lot of New York Times, Guardian, BuzzFeed, etc. But hand in hand with that goes rejection. So it's a very tough career. And if it's one that you haven't chosen, it can get a little tougher. But, I often think of it, for me, I think of it less as a passion. People say, oh, you're doing your passion. I'm like, no, for me, really, it's work. And it's no different from other people who go to work. People go to work for so many reasons. They don't love their work, but yet they get up and they put on their shoes and they go. And I follow in their footsteps. Sometimes you might not love what you do, but if that's what you do, you get up and you do it. So, yeah. So
it seems like your heart is still into acting.
Funnily enough, my TEDx talk I had a huge epiphany during my TEDx talk, which was that I think I stuck to writing because at such an early age, so many of my decisions and so much of my agency was taken away from me. And when you're acting, you're telling other people's stories, you're still being given direction. It's not your agency per se, but with writing, it's you're, so to speak, the goddess in that, you're the creator. All the control is with you. And I think slowly I began to fall in love a little bit with writing without realizing it, because it did give me that autonomy, which I hadn't had growing up. And then I had another epiphany during, I was giving a keynote at a writers conference. Whenever I give keynotes and stuff, I always have some epiphany. But it was either that or I gave a Citizen Oath Ceremony welcome keynote speech. And I bring lots of things from my life up, but I had an epiphany there that, out of all the movies that could have made me say, I want to be an actress, it was Umrao Jan, in which there was such a social consciousness, the dark complexion, the prostitution, what it means to be a woman, feminist, independent wife. And I began to think, why was it that movie? And I think I realized that for me, it wasn't so. For me, I think at that young age, acting meant that I would have a voice that could talk about or that could express or show to people social ills and social justice and social issues, And I think at that young age, that's what my brain took from that movie, that, acting is a way to show people that these things happen in the world and how to, bring about change and stuff. And I think slowly as I began to write and everything, I think I never returned to wanting to act, because writing is so much that, and then through writing, like I said, it's your own agency and it's your own stories that you choose to tell, rather than in acting, which is waiting for a really good script to show up and tell a movie that way. But also, let's not downplay the fact that the clout and the clout and power that perhaps actors, actresses, celebrities, etc., seem to have in our world today is, writers. Sometimes you wonder, with writers and writing, but writing books and writing have meant so much to me. They've been my parents. They've grown me up. So I don't want to discount or downplay that either. There's room for everything, but movies have been a big part of my life also.
It's a form of creativity. It's a form of expression, to be able to showcase your thoughts and feelings and to be able to, put them into, give formation to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So where did you come up with the name of this novel, Unmarriageable?
So Unmarriageable it's a post-colonial parallel retelling of Jane Austen's classic novel Pride and Prejudice. And when I say post-colonial parallel, the reason I wrote it was because of British Empire history in the subcontinent, especially linguistic history, which is why we're talking English, or, and a lot of the problems and issues that actually British Empire brought when it came to linguistics into the subcontinent and then into Pakistan, India, etc. A lot of divisions sown because of that. And one of the epigraphs in Unmarriageable is actually by the Thomas Babington Macaulay, who in 1835 suggested to British Parliament that English should be the official language across empire. And by that, he clearly means, and it's written in the speech in Unmarriageable's epigraph in the beginning, that he wanted to create confused people who are white in spirit but brown in color. And I guess he wanted to, have split identities, split loyalties and stuff. And Unmarriageable is one of Professor Nalini Iyer of Seattle University. She was interviewing me for one of my book launches, and she said that Unmarriageable is Babington Macaulay's worst nightmare, which was a wonderful compliment because because it subverted everything that he was trying to do. Now, with such goals and aspirations, which I really didn't know if I, which were quite intimidating often to write this novel, to decide on a title for it. I always sort of knew I wanted one word, but this was a novel that usually titles just come to me, but this was a very difficult novel to give an appropriate title to. Because, as with Pride and Prejudice, and like I said, this is a parallel retelling. So the story, the plot, the characters, everything are the same, but it's got my own twist. It's set in Pakistan. There are new characters in it. Mr. Bennet has its own arc. The five sisters are, they're all grappling with their own thing. One is grappling with weight issues. One is grappling with, Jane Bennet, as we know, is not getting married, a lot of different things. But because it was a post-colonial retelling, and the title was tough for me. We thought of many silly titles, which in retrospect was silly. It so happened then that my family was we were in vacation in Washington, D.C., visiting museums. And there was a particular painting that I wanted to see. And I thought it was in one museum. And my husband said that, no, it's in the other museum. And of course, I said he was wrong. And as I went stomping off to the museum I thought it was in, I said, oh, he's so unmarriageable. And as soon as I said that, I was like, I have my title. It's one word. There's something so gripping and for me conflicting in that one word. And it sort of encapsulated the entire, not just the concept, honestly, of marriage within the novel or the five sisters and what it means to be marriageable, like they say, the phrase marriageable material, etc. But also within East and West, like, are the two cultures, are the two worlds, are the two perspectives, or whatever, when you have divisive things, are they always unmarriageable? Or can a marriage be made of worlds? Can a marriage be made of different ways of living, cultures? I mean, what else is a multicultural society but a marriage of different cultures living together, So Unmarriageable just fit for me in so many different ways for this novel. But, I have to say, my husband was right. But we won't tell him that, so shh. Like that, it's like I say, sometimes get married, sometimes they come in use. It's okay.
There's got to be some purpose, right?
Yeah, there is. There we have it. This was it.
Besides procreation.
Yes, that is its own interesting little, what shall we call it, fun and games. And it's not for everyone too. I think the thing is, in our cultures especially, we are so often conditioned to think of, that three things actually are, I know that nature guarantees one thing in life, which is death. We all know we're going to die. But in our culture, the other two things which seem guaranteed are that if you're a woman, you're going to get married and then you have to have children. And I'm so glad to see this changing because, in the novel, my protagonist, my main character, Alice, she never wants to get married. And she's very adamant about it because she wants to find someone who that she can not only love, and for her, love is not the most important thing, really. For her, being able to like and respect someone is most important, and that he should like and respect her. Sometimes I feel that we're so caught up in love stories and stuff, we forget like stories, that you have to like that person also. And I've often always wondered, even growing up, as you can this the whole concept of love at first sight. What are you falling in love with? You're just falling in love with looks then, right? You see each other across a room and your eyes meet and it's love. No, it's actually lust. You basically want to have a good time adventure with that person. and which is why the whole concept, I think, of arranged marriages fascinates people so much, especially the more traditional ones. I mean, nowadays, and for so many years now, in so many families, those days are gone where marriage is everywhere in the world. I mean, what else is royalty but a whole history of people getting married in order to merge their assets and their properties and their kingdoms and stuff, So obviously, so that's why it was arranged. It was arranged for economic reasons. But we've obviously shifted from that paradigm for a very long time. And now when people suggest, like they like to call them boys and girls, no matter how aged they are in Pakistan or in that region, you meet each other, you decide if you like each other, and if you don't, you move on. There's no enforced marriages. And for those that are enforced marriages, I don't call them arranged, I call them enforced marriages. But
it's still there, right? I mean, probably vast majority.
I think so much depends on I always say this, on the class that you come from, and then within that, the family that you come from. I mean, and I always give my example, which is my parents sent me to the US in the early 90s to go to college by myself. Yeah. And yet acting was a no-no. So, I always ask, were they progressive? Were they conservative? Obviously, they were a mix of both, which is how sometimes we find most of our families. There's no this and that. There's always a mix of different things within families. And yeah.
When you were working on your book, Sonia, did you did you feel that things have started to change in Pakistan, or they are still the same, where it's still those same conditions that, okay, you have come into this world because you're going to grow up, you're going to get married, and you're going to have children?
I think a lot of parents would certainly like that trajectory for their children, both girls and boys. Uh-huh. And I think a lot of that reason is that because in Pakistan, if you come from a Muslim background, then, as we know in Islam, premarital sex is a sin. It's not allowed. So in order to then enjoy bedroom adventures and if you want them children, etc., you do have to get married, which is where early marriages and stuff come into play also, because the earlier you get married, you can start a family, get on with your life, etc. So I think as long, but that, like I said, in any country and in any culture, once again, depending on the class that you're from, and then within that class, socioeconomic background, the family that you come from, can really determine the lifestyle and the choices that you will have as long as you're in your parents' house. I mean, some people in Pakistan are fine if their sons and daughters date, if they, go to parties, if they drink, if they whatever. And then there's some families that would be appalled at such a thing, So there are families where the girls are still sneaking out of the bedroom to go meet a boyfriend or to go to a party or whatever. And then there are others who are, kissing their parents good night and saying, okay, so, I'll be back in the morning and see you and stuff. So also so many different families. There's no one way. There's no one Pakistan, and there's no one way to be Pakistani.
And that the same thing used to happen. I mean, just like you, I came to the US, in the 90s to study over here. So I came as a student, it was the same back then. It's, I think, the same now. The different socioeconomic groups. Yeah. The backgrounds and the mindsets, and you see all those.
Right. Or and sometimes, people sometimes tend to make the mistake of thinking that if you are more affluent, then you might give your children more permission to do things, and vice versa. And that's not necessarily true. It really depends on what sort of parents you have and what sort of thinking they have and how they want you to be brought up, and what sort of values they want to impart to you in the world. And then, of course, once you cross a certain age, you have your own value system, and you're old enough then. I mean, I have 3 kids, and I've brought them up to absolutely think for themselves. Of course, the the con that comes with that is that, I've basically given birth to my own judges who are constantly in judgment of me. I did this wrong and I did that. And I mean, they're nice kids. But, but the thing is, because they think and they're not afraid to speak their mind, that means that they can tell me things also, right? But that is the way I brought them up, because I believe that at the end of the day, they're not just my children, but they're citizens of the world, and they need to think and stuff, right?
Not just your byproduct, right? But
yes, they're not just extensions of me, and now they have to be like me, think like me, do everything to please me and whatever. They have their own lives to live. Now, I think it would be easy for any psychologist, therapist, etc., to immediately connect that to my own upbringing, where I wasn't allowed to do the dream I wanted to do. So
going back to Rajan.
Yes, it goes back to everything goes back to Rajan. But the thing is that so many different families, so many different ways of upbringing, of what of what your belief is and in your value system. So, and all these things I've written about in Unmarriageable. So it's set completely in Pakistan. It's not an immigrant tale. There's no terrorism. There's no, put upon women. It's five sisters trying to really navigate through these questions themselves about honestly what it means to be loyal to your mother who wants you to get married, and what it means to be loyal to yourself if you don't necessarily agree with your mother that marriage is the only thing of importance in your life, because there's so many women in Pakistan who absolutely have a career, I mean, we've got women in Pakistan, they're pilots, they're in the police force, they're CEOs, they're models, actresses, singers, army, engineers. Like I said, my mother is an anesthesiologist from back, from not just contemporary, but back in the day and stuff. So, the Pakistani women run the gamut of sports women, all the things they can do. And yet marriage is still, it's considered to be a very important part of their life, and one which, it's if a woman still says that I want to be single, I don't want to get married. I think in the US also it raises a few questions and stuff, as to why not, because it's considered such a part of our life and what we should.
Are you specifically referring to the Pakistanis or the Desis of US?
I can't speak for everyone, obviously, but I'm just saying that, there are cultures where no matter what else you accomplish, even if you get a Nobel Prize. I remember I was watching a documentary of Malala Yousafzai, and they're crossing a parking lot or something, and she's, and she's so obviously highly accomplished and everything, and yet her mother was a bit worried about, when you're getting married, and I just found that, culturally very cute. But on the other hand, also I was like,
something can't change.
I was like, if nothing else, Malala and I have this in common at least, and she has this in common with my Bennett sisters in Unmarriageable. When are you getting married? Everything, it's all very well, Nobel Prize, everything is great. When are you getting married?
Yes. The most vital and the most important question.
And the thing is, I mean, I think if you find the right person, and that is what you want, it's a wonderful thing, right? And also having kids. But I would really like to see, that if you do not want to get married, or you don't find the right person, or you don't want to have children, that this becomes very normal also, that there aren't raised eyebrows and whispers and what's wrong with her, can't she have children, and any of that sort of stuff, And I think that is slowly happening. I mean, there are a lot of, the key factor in a lot of this is obviously financial independence, something that men have just enjoyed since time immemorial, and perhaps the gender roles, the more traditional gender roles of mother and provider and stuff, were there for biological reasons to begin with. But over time, obviously, women are now earning, sometimes out-earning men in so many fields and so many respects, especially, I think I was of the cusp generation where we had just begun to, where the thought of obviously being educated, making your own money was there. But the thought of making your own money seemed almost relegated to pocket money, rather than money that you could actually pay your bills with and pay them well, so you would be financially independent. So I definitely think that those who are of a younger generation than me are definitely more equipped in a world where they see that, have financial independence really is the route to all your independence in many, many respects. And therefore we see a sea change in Pakistan, where divorce used to be taboo, or at least talking about it. It's certainly not taboo anymore. And, and a lot of parents have
support. It shouldn't be. I mean, it's such even over here, it's such, I think the first thing for gossip when friends meet, the first thing which is discussed is, oh, did you hear about such and such person?
The thing is, I have to say, gossip is always going to be there. We are social creatures. We talk about each other. I think gossip, which has the power to hurt and harm you, is what is not nice. And gossip can hurt and harm you when you are dependent on other people and they care about what is being said about you. If you are once again financially independent and able to pay your own bills and stuff and not beholden to anyone, whether it's your parents' house or whatever, and no one can tell you, oh, look at what people are saying and what will people say. And that's a phrase that recurs in Unmarriageable all the time. What will people say? There's a gossip column in Unmarriageable called What Will People Say? But, once you can pay your own bills and stuff, you honestly stop caring. You don't have to really care that much about what anyone will say, because your livelihood doesn't depend on that. Your reputation might, but if you can pay your bills well and live well, what does that reputation really mean at the end of the day? Let people gossip. Enjoy. People who gossip, have fun. Enjoy yourselves.
My perspective is I recently was called as a guest on this show, and they asked me, so how do you react if someone comes and tells you they don't like you, or if someone says they don't like you? I'm like, 7 billion plus world population. I mean, I would need to be a really egoistic person to expect that the 7 billion population.
I not only expect the 7 billion to like me, Saima, I'm expecting that they all love me. They're madly in love with me. They have nothing terrible to say about me. And, they're, which is so ridiculous. I mean, as a writer with books out there, and I review books professionally, interview authors and stuff myself and everything. The fact, and as I said, I have a great love for films and movies and everything. You and I can go in and watch the same film, and I can come out and not like it, or like it, and you can come out and have the opposite feeling for it. Now, that doesn't mean that the film is good or bad or whatever. It's just that given our sensibilities and whatnot, I think it's the same with people also. All 7 billion people cannot like you and me, because there might be things in us which, is not sitting well with them for their issues, not ours. It's not our problem if someone doesn't like us or cheats us or is envious or is not nice to us. I think, I think it's good to be, it's not good. I think it's vital to be as kind as you can with everyone. And leave the rest to what can you do if someone doesn't like you. Never know why someone is not liking you. I mean, sometimes petty little things, or you don't think something can bother someone, but it is bothering them. I mean, you don't know what's happening in someone else's house.
We perceive things based on our own background, based on our own upbringing, based on our own process.
And the fact is, not everyone. My thing is, not everyone can get along with everyone. And neither should they. But what I would like to, what I would prefer is to live in a society where law and order works equally for everyone, where there isn't racism, there isn't socioeconomic unfairness going around and stuff. I mean, we can't all like each other 24 hours.
Respect. I mean, just I think, just like your kids, I have some judges in my house as well. Constantly,
No, but these are special judges. We have brought them up. We have nurtured them to judges.
So they are constantly watching every single thing that comes out of my mouth, and the multiple times when I'm reprimanded and slapped on the
Yes. No, I mean, when this interview, right before we went live on air, you heard me screaming at my youngest one because my dog was in my room and I wanted him to take him up. And I'd already told him 2-3 times. And finally I screamed And he comes down nonchalantly, and I'm like, you made me scream. And he's like, well, you could have come up and told me still. And I'm like, this is my 12-year-old. And I was like, okay, all right. Because I remember my father and people of that generation, often, you'll hear them saying that when I was growing up, I couldn't open my eyes in front, I couldn't even look my father in the eyes, or let alone raise my voice or say something back and whatever. And I always find that so interesting, because with each generation, it seems to perhaps, things shift a little bit, or maybe they shift house to house, because my 12-year-old has no issue looking me in the eyes and saying many a thing, but it's okay. It's all right. I think sometimes people confuse individual, opinions or being able to speak their mind with being rude. And like I've told my kids, as long as you're not rude, you can say whatever you want. You have your opinion, and I respect that. But it shouldn't be rude. There shouldn't be any disdain. You whether I know better than you or not, or whether you have more knowledge in a particular field than I do, which kids these days do. I mean, there's so much knowledge at their fingertips, but there shouldn't be any rudeness or disdain, no matter whether you're speaking to me or to anyone else. And that, I feel, is where sometimes people mix up, because people will say, oh, if you become a certain way, then your kids will become rude and whatnot. And I'm like, no, politeness and manners and courtesy is different from speaking your mind. So politicians should also listen to this interview and learn from this and learn from us.
I think
I'm kidding.
Again, it boils down to respect.
Yeah.
I think it's important to teach. And I think, this is what my kids are teaching me. They're teaching me to be respectful of everyone, of their decisions, of their choices, to be mindful of what I say to others, because words matter, to be non-judgmental, because it's not my place to judge.
Yeah. And I think it's a job well done if they realize that their parents too are human beings. We can't be perfect all of the time. We all have our baggage to carry also, and it's nice when they're able to, after they cross a certain age or a certain maturity level and stuff, for them also to see that even grown-ups go through their struggles and stuff and try to do what is best, not just with them, but with anything, with anything. I mean, things pop up in life. So
I mean, I'm always telling my kids that, hey, just because I'm your mom, it doesn't mean I'm perfect. I mean, I make my own share of mistakes and rights and wrongs, and that's just how it is. You make mistakes, you make amends, you get up and keep going.
Yeah, which is still in stark contrast to, once again, I think a different style of parenting, or yesteryear parenting, where it was, where parents would say, well, I have the experience and my word is final and I know better than you and I know what's best for you. And I'd always struggled with that sentence. I know what's best for you. But how do you know what's best for me?
Oh,
because I'd always think, I don't know. I'd always think, I don't know what's best for you. How the hell do you know what's best for me? Yeah.
Well, it's it's. I'm telling you, it's that Umrao another. It's.
I grew up, like I said, on. I loved reading. I loved reading, but I grew up on a lot of film also. I grew up on what was then called Indian movies, and now we call it Bollywood. But I loved, back then it was called art cinema, and now it's just it's a mix of everything. But so I watched a lot of art movies and stuff. I grew up on Pakistani dramas. I grew up on, obviously, Western movies and TV shows when I was in Saudi Arabia for the longest time. So by dint of not growing up in one country, I wasn't just exposed to the culture and the pop culture of that one country, because I was in Saudi Arabia, and because at that time they would import everything: British shows, American shows, Indian stuff, Pakistani stuff, everything. Whether on TV or on VCR. I was exposed to a lot of different cultures, and I went to an international school in Pakistan. So my peers, my friends and all, it was like the student body was like a mini United Nations completely. So I was very, if in my house sex was not a good thing, being Muslim, in my Danish friend's house it was no big deal.
Yeah.
If in my house, if kissing scenes were said, oh, close your eyes, forward it. In other people's houses it was like no big deal. So I got to see, because I got to see so many different ways at a very early age of living your life, of your moral and ethical values and systems, and I just absorbed it all. So for me, any concept of this is bad and this is good and this will whatever, I just never bought that. And but to go back to films and stuff, that yes, Umrao Jaan was seminal, but two other Indian movies I think were really, really seminal for me also. I always attribute a lot of my thinking, or I guess in so many ways, to these three movies. So Umrao Jaan, Dhool Ka Phool, which was about an abortion, or this lot of social issues again, and then another social issue film with Zeenat Aman, Insaf Ka Tarazu. So these three movies were really, really
allowed to see it. We really wanted to.
I wasn't allowed to see Insaf Ka Tarazu. We had it was very odd. So my parents were watching it, and we had a glass cabinet in the dining room, which was so positioned that the TV screen reflected on that, which is how I watched it. Please don't ask. So I was, but when I was a little older, and then I actually watched the movie on my own time, I remember thinking to this movie, as we know, Insaf Ka Tarazu, is about two models, and one of them gets raped, and then there's a court case, and about what it means that if you're a woman of a certain bent and you're modeling and you're modern and progressive, can you actually be raped, and what does it mean? Very fascinating, interesting movie. And and I remember thinking to myself that this is a movie that as everyone should be allowed to watch, but especially as a female, as identifies, as a girl or whatever. And I'm being forbidden for watching something that could so easily have repercussions in my own life or the way I think. And I was, I think, 15, 16 at the time, thinking to myself, why would my brother be allowed to watch this? But it was the same thing as, why would my younger brother, who's 9 years younger than me, be allowed to have a telephone in his room, but I can't? Like, what is this gender thing? Like, why is my father allowed to smoke, but it's bad for me to smoke? Like, what are these morals and ethics? Where have they come from? Like lungs, I remember distinctly, I was like, lungs are lungs. If he smokes or I smoke, it's going to cause the same damage. So why have I turned into a slut because I'm smoking? Yeah. and the guys are cool and whatever, studs, because I'm a slut but he's a stud, and so much of life seemed to be arranged around.
Title for you.
What is the title?
He's
a stud but I'm a slut. Yeah. Yes, so I saw these things from such an early age, and so many on TV, on screen, on so many of the movies, Bazaar, Smita Patel, etc., Shwana Azmi's Bazaar, where the girl is being sold off to get married and stuff. And all of and so many of the in that movie, the men are smoking, they're listening to songs and ghazals, and the men are smoking, but the women are sitting there demurely. And the whole concept of vamps, and if a woman smoked, she was this. I found it very obviously fascinating, but also very perplexing. At a very early age, I started to say, why is this? And I was always attracted towards the vamps and the prostitutes and stuff. Reason being that they seemed to have some autonomy. They had agency. The wives seemed to be these little things waiting at home. Na jao Saima, don't leave me today. Stay with me. I'm your little lovely wife who will obey you. Whereas the other, the other women were earning money also. The vamps with their cabaret dancing and the prostitutes with their brothels and stuff, they were actually earning women in these films that I grew up in, these Indian films that I grew up on, versus the wives who were just at home, waiting for their husbands to come back. So anyway, that's the milieu I grew up in. Lots of different exposure to a lot of different cultures, a lot of different ways of thinking and stuff. But these three movies definitely were. Dhool Ka Phool was, I remember, that song in it, Ke tu na Hindu banega na Musalman banega.
Yeah.
इंसान की औलाद है इंसान बनेगा. I remember watching that and hearing that at a young age, and that really struck me because I was like, it's true. What does it matter if you're a Hindu or a Muslim or a Christian, Sikh, Parsi, Buddhist, whatever, if you're not a good human being? If you're not, what does, because this guy, this man finds this baby abandoned, and he brings him home to bring him up, and this is a song he sings to him because he doesn't know what religion this infant was born into. So he says, you know what, you're not Hindu, you're not Muslim, I'm going to bring you up as a human being. And that was so seminal for me, so yeah. I mean,
I say that all the time. I mean, I think I pretty much say this on every show of mine that, everyone is fighting over whose God is better. And the irony is that, you know what? All of us are.
the thing is, they're also fighting over, perhaps, or quarreling over whose God is better, and whose religion is better, because at the end of the day, what they're fighting for really is whose morals and ethics are perhaps better. Are the vegetarians' morals and ethics better? Are the meat eaters' morals and ethics better? And what they seem to really forget is that for all of these religions, at the end of the day, they're all quite similar. Don't lie, don't steal, don't cheat, don't do this, don't do that, be nice to each other, whatever.
And don't judge.
Don't judge. The good messages are all the same.
Yes.
But it just seems to be that everyone's caught up in the differences in these religions rather than the sameness. And it's what is happening right now in that region is just very upsetting. I mean, for me, who has grown up on Indian movies and songs like "Tu na Hindu banega na Musliman banega," to see what's happening now is very distressing.
Yeah. Absolutely, and that's I think part of the mission statement of my podcast is literally just that for me it's a soundboard. It's a place for me to express my opinions, to search for whatever it is that I'm searching for, find answers for whatever questions I might have within me, and to be able to put it out there to connect with people, regardless of religion, gender.
Yes, and I think a lot of times people, and we did bring it up a little earlier, which is, this doesn't mean that everyone has to love each other and like each other and be best friends. Like you said, it just means you have to respect each other and not necessarily hate each other or wish
if you don't
wish
need
ill for. Yeah.
Right? But don't even engage if you don't want to engage with each other, right?
Yeah.
Just respect the fact that we are all different. I mean, isn't it amazing that 7 billion plus population and every individual is different?
We're all snowflakes, which are all different also.
Right? So if the universe did not want us to be all different, the world would not be so colorful and the way that it is.
I wonder what twins and identical twins and triplets are going to say about that. No, I'm kidding. but yeah, I think some countries in the world have forgotten how to be a little kind to each other.
Absolutely.
And I think we've entered obviously a new phase. I mean, with the internet, with the connectivity we have today, we're bombarded with a lot of news, a new way of, like when the radio came about, TV came about, and this is actually so different in a way, because there's so many, between social media, between TV screens, between streaming, there's so many, so many different ways for everyone to have a voice and voice their opinion. And I think our brains are still trying to grasp that, as well as our cultures are trying to grasp what it means when so many people now can voice their opinions and have their opinions heard. What does it mean to have this mass opinions everywhere versus traditionally, even with radio and with TV and stuff, growing up, there'd be one TV channel or one or two or three. And that would be it. We'd all sort of grow up watching the same movies. We'd all sort of, there was still a collective pop culture ethos. But that seems to have, my kids tend to watch different things. I'm watching different things. Everyone's doing their different things. There are more pockets of differences in that way. And sometimes it's very seldom that very seldom that not just an entire country might be engaged in watching one particular thing. And then again, it depends on the age group, right? When I'm talking and saying that people are, because pop culture, I feel, can be very influential in things, but even in songs and stuff, used to be, there would be, in my time, there was one Madonna. Everyone knew who Madonna was and what she stood for and what she was doing with her conical bras. And oh my God, some people were like, yay, Madonna. Some people were like, oh my God, she's going to ruin the world. And where's she going to take us? But everyone knew who Madonna was, Michael Jackson was, people, icons, people like that, Prince was. But nowadays, there are just so many also. And sometimes even within generations, within people living in the same house, kids, parents, etc., people have different icons, I guess, and sometimes those clashes. I mean, it's a different world we're living in, and it's going to be an interesting world to see how politicians, how society, how all of us may come to terms with so many different voices, icons, people out there. So far, it's not been a huge success, at least as we see in the US. But there seems to be, when it comes to accountability and when it comes to who should have a voice, these are still new questions because suddenly everyone has a voice.
So what are your future plans? What's next?
Watch a lot of movies. No. Just hopefully be able to write more and be able to get, publishing. Writing is a separate thing and publishing is its own different beast. So, as a writer of color in the US, I mean, Unmarriageable came out with Penguin Random House. It's completely set in Pakistan. It's I did not think it would get published because of that reason, because it's so hard to get published over here. But I was pleasantly surprised, and people seem to be reading it, loving it, and everything. So that's wonderful. And so I hope to write some more books, and I hope they do get published here. Sometimes the concerns that we as writers of color have versus publishing houses, which are businesses and what they want to put out, because their focus is on sales, don't gel. And as a writer of color, sometimes you do worry about that, because there's no guarantee that what is of concern to you will gel with that. But hopefully it will. And and I write very different sorts of things. Unmarriageable, like I said, is a post-colonial retelling. My novel, An Isolated Incident, which was just reissued in England and is still available there it's about it is an immigrant story set in the US. It has it's about, and a lot of the theme is about who does a country belong to. It's set in the Kashmir conflict emotionally, and it really is a lot of it is about people who have grown up in a country, and then a diaspora which has emotionally grown up in a country. So whose country is it? Those who have physically grown up somewhere, or those who have emotionally grown up in a place due to their memories or their parents' memories? It's about 1947 and partition also and stuff. How much hold should your ancestors or your parents' memories have on the way you live your life? What is the meaning of memory at the end of the day? Is memory something that should stop you from living your life, or is memory something that should help you in healing and getting on with your lives? So it addresses a lot of those questions. So very different things from, in both novels. So I hope to, and I write a lot of personal essays about a lot of things. And they're all over the internet. If someone does a search, they should come up. But, I write about parenting. I had very bad miscarriage. I have a essay on that in the New York Times. Food, I write about food also. Lots of different, so I don't know what's next. Whatever catches my fancy, and that I can, and by that I mean something that I can actually sit down and focus on for a long time, and we'll see what that is. I'm not really working on anything right now.
Your journey in getting your book published. What advice would you give to the authors who, or I should say, aspiring authors or people who write and they dream about publishing their book? What advice would you give?
I would say, write the best book you possibly can. And by that, I mean, focus on your craft. Sometimes I feel that a lot of times, and I'm sure I started out like this also, writing something, thinking it was great, sending it out. A diary entry is not a story, there's certain craft to writing a short story, to writing a novel. And once you have learned that and you've written something which your beta readers, or you feel is finally there, then you have to find an agent. And then an agent is a middle person who then you don't, most publishing houses require a literary agent to submit your work. You don't submit it directly. There are few that allow you to do that, but not all. So I would just say that if writing, writing is a very hard field because of publishing. Publishing is cutthroat. It's hard to get published, and then once you get published, they're the reviews, they're the finding readers, etc. Very hard field. I really think that, and usually when it comes to the creative arts, most people enter it because they have a passion for it, whether it's singing, whether it's painting, whether it's acting, writing and stuff. Most people enter these because there's not a lot of money usually to be made in this. And if you're looking for fame and stuff, I think stick to modeling and acting. Writing doesn't have that sort of thing anymore. So if you want to be a writer, then I feel that you're doing it because you really have a passion to express yourself through words, and that's what it really is at the end of the day. We all express ourselves in different ways. Even hobbies are expressions. Even knitting is a form of expression, So with writing, if that's your passion, then absolutely give it a go and stick to it. And if you're passionate enough, I think, sooner or later something will come out of it. And I've learned this because I was not passionate about it. So every time I get a rejection and stuff, I'd be like, what the hell? I don't even want to do this. So, but when I saw that those who have come into writing with a passion, often you'll hear writers say that, oh, I was in the 3rd grade and so-and-so teacher said that I, looked at my story or writing and I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. I read that book. They stick to it, ups, downs, whatever. They have a true passion for it. But in my case, since I didn't, I can tell you that if you have a true passion for it, you'll enter that field, whichever creative field it is, and you'll stick to it because you are coming from passion. Because in our world today, I mean, for whatever reasons, we put such an emphasis on money as the measure of success, how much that person makes, what designation they're at. That seems to be our focal point of success in so many fields and stuff. But with artists, often that's not the focal point of success. We don't make, few of us make that enough money to impress, a lot of people. But what we do, which is perhaps what a lot of, we give people hope. We give people hope. We give them entertainment. We give them a lot more things which money can't buy or money can't measure. And if you're passionate about doing that, then you'll get somewhere. You'll get somewhere.
So, Sonia, you won't believe this, but we are reaching the end of our show. Time flies when you're having.
It does. Yes.
And a last final message for the people watching. What would you like for them to do? Where can they find you? Your website, your
Yes, I have a website. It's soniahkamal.com. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at the same handle, Soniah Kamal. My name is up there, spelled the same way. So at Soniah Kamal, I'm active on all three. And Instagram, I'd love. Please follow me on Twitter and Instagram and see all the stuff. I like posting things. So yeah, and thank you so much, Saima, for having me on. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you, getting to know you, talking to you.
It was lovely. Thank you so much for being on my show, Sonia. It was indeed an honor and a pleasure. Thank you for enhancing my knowledge and my wisdom.
Thank you.
Being here.
Bye.
Bye. So on that note, another episode comes to an end. Once again, thank you for carving out the time to hear what was shared on today's podcast. If this inspired you to take the next step in your journey, then I want to invite you to join my email list by emailing vip@saimadillon.com. And of course, if you know this podcast episode will help someone else, then help me change lives. Take 30 seconds to simply share the link to the podcast in a text or post it on social media. I will be so grateful. Until next time, thank you for being here. And thank you for joining us today.